On August 27, 1906, Ed Gein was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin, USA. At the age of 8, the family, Ed, his brother Henry, and his parents moved to the village of Plainfield, Iowa. They lived on a remote farm, and the village was very small, with a population of only 700 people. The reason for moving to this village is Ed's mother, Augusta. She was a very devout and strict Christian. Feeling that their life in La Crosse could ruin her children, she forced her husband to move to the village. His mother was a very strict person, and she taught him that we were not allowed to communicate with anyone outside the family. She always taught them that people were evil. Ed lived his life as a loner with no friends, no jobs, and no income. As for his relationship with his father, it was bad. His father was an alcoholic man who always beat and abused him. At the age of 13, Ed left school and began working on their farm. Then in 1940, his father died of heart failure, and Ed and his brother Henry were forced to work on the family farm. Henry, Ed's brother, objected to his mother on many things that he thought were wrong. But Ed thought his mother could do no wrong. Because of this, he always had problems with his brother. But in 1944, disaster struck the family. One day, a fire broke out on the family farm, and Ed and his brother Henry tried to put out the fire. Ed went to ask the neighbors for help, but when he returned, his brother was lying on the ground with bruises on his head. After they provided him with first aid, the result was his death from a heart attack while extinguishing the fire. He hit his head when he fell and hit a rock. When his mother heard the news, she had a stroke and was in bad shape. But for Ed, he was happy to be the only person close to his mother. But what he did not expect was that his mother would die 19 months after her illness, on December 29, 1945. The news of her death completely devastated Ed, and his psychological state became very bad. Those who attended his mother's funeral said that he was crying hysterically, and he was 39 years old at the time. His mother was everything to him, and after her death, he lived as a recluse on the family farm. November 16, 1957 was the first day of that year's deer hunting season. At that time, all the men living in the village went into the forest to hunt deer. But Ed decided to stay in the village. Ed got into his car and went to a store. The owner of this store was a woman named Bernice, who was 58 years old. Ed knew her and was always trying to get close to her and talk to her, but she always turned him away. So he took the opportunity that day, and since there were no men in the village, he decided to commit his crime that day. He asked her to give him antifreeze, and after she gave it to him, she wrote a receipt in his name. Then he asked her to show him one of the hanging pieces. When she turned around, he grabbed his gun and shot her. After killing her, he dragged the body, put it in the car, and took it to his farm. On the same day, her son returned from the forest to the store. When he entered, he did not see his mother and was surprised, but then he saw traces of blood on the ground. The first person he thought of was Ed, because he was always trying to get closer to his mother. When the police searched the place, they found the receipt that Bernice had written to Ed. When they saw the receipt, they said he was probably the last person to see it. But it is impossible for him to be the killer because all the villagers loved him, and it is impossible for him to be the killer. But when a group of police came looking for him, they found him having dinner with one of his neighbors, so they arrested him. Then they went to Ed's farm to check it out. That night was a very cold and dark night. At that time, the police entered the farm to search for anything that would lead them to the victim, Bernice. Suddenly, in one corner of the house, the police turned on the lamp and they saw Bernice's body hanging by her feet, her entire body completely cut off. And when the news spread in the village, the people were shocked by what had happened. Is it possible for this poor, kind man to kill a woman and dismember her body? But what they didn't know was that their neighbor was a serial killer. After what they saw, police officers went to the farm to search it. They found the place there looking like a garbage dump and chaos all over the place. Surprisingly, the house was filled with items made of human skin and bones, such as chairs and household utensils, and making gloves and blankets from human skin. In addition, they found 12 heads and a jar filled with human noses. Masks made of human head skins hang from the ceiling. Not only that, he made an entire suit out of human skin. He would wear it in one of the women's masks and walk around the house until he felt that his mother was still with him. It was clear that he was doing everything he could to get his mother back. Some of his neighbors would sometimes go to his house, but he would not allow them to enter the part where he placed corpses and human masks. Sometimes he invited them to eat and everything was fine, but after this crime, they discovered that the plates in which they were eating were made of human skulls. Ed was fond of reading books, but not just any books. He read magazines and books about crime and criminals. He even read medical and anatomy books to learn more about the human body. Even his work on the farm helped him with such things because he learned how to butcher and skin animals. While police were searching the farm, they found the head of a woman who had been missing for 2 years. Then they found the remains of a woman who had been missing for 3 years. Her name is Mary, and Mary worked in one of the bars in the village. When she disappeared, people were always talking about her. Ed would always come up to them and tell them it wasn't gone. She was at his house, but they did not believe him. They thought he was joking with them, and they did not take his words seriously. When they started interrogating him, he did not speak to them for a whole day. But the next day, after pressing, he told them to bring him a pie with slices of cheese on it. And then he surprised them with something and told them that he was not a serial killer. And the things they saw in his house were stolen from the bodies of the victims from their graves. Because 2 years after his mother died, he started robbing graves. He would go to cemeteries, dig up graves, and take parts of the bodies. He did not take the jewelry or valuables that were with the body. Even the villagers did not understand what they saw and heard about Ed. All they knew was that this man was an ordinary person like them. Even his brother, whom we talked about at the beginning of the video, and who died during the outbreak of the fire. Many people said he was the one who killed him because he was always against his mother. He told them that he always went to the cemetery, and one time a woman died in the village who looked very much like his mother. So out of longing for his mother, he went to her grave, cleaned the grave, took the body, and transported it to the farm. The investigators went to the cemetery and decided to dig some graves to confirm the truth of his statements, and it was a shock that everything he said was true. The reason he did not leave his mother's body was that the grave soil was sandy and the coffin was buried inside a concrete grave, so it was impossible to open the grave. After his confession to the investigators, they felt that this man was mentally ill. After they referred him to court, they decided that this man suffers from a mental illness and suffers from serious psychological disorders. He had hallucinations and told them that he heard strange noises and that the trees were talking to him. Then they sent him to the criminal insane hospital. But Ed's story remained popular in the village. In 1958, they issued a resolution to auction off Ed's farm, but the villagers were angry and they set fire to the farm. But then, a villager bought Ed's car, which he used to transport the body to his home for $700 at auction. After he bought it, he put it inside a tent and began photographing people for 25 cents. On July 26, 1984, Ed Gein died of lung cancer at the age of 77. After that, he was buried next to his mother. After Ed's story spread, many books and films were written about his story of the same name. Thus, we have reached the end of our story. See you in the next video.